The strange signal. Alex lived a quiet life in his small apartment at the edge of the city. He wasn't the kind of person who believed in the extraordinary. His days were spent working at a local bookstore, and his nights were usually quiet, filled with books, movies, or stargazing from his rooftop. It was a peaceful life, though sometimes it felt empty. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and stars began to sprinkle across the dark sky, Alex sat on his rooftop with an old radio he had picked up from a flea market. The radio was broken, its dials rusted and its antenna bent, but Alex liked how it looked. He never expected it to work. But that night, something strange happened. The radio crackled to life. At first, it was just static, a soft hum that Alex barely noticed. Then, a voice broke through the noise, a voice that didn't belong. "Please, help me," it said, soft and melodic. The words were clear, but they seemed to echo, as if coming from far, far away. Alex froze. He stared at the radio, unsure of what he had just heard. The voice came again, this time more urgent. "I don't want to be alone anymore." A chill ran down his spine. Was someone nearby using some kind of prank device? He looked around the rooftop, but it was empty. Just him, the stars, and the strange voice from the radio. "Who's there?" Alex said, his voice shaky. He didn't expect an answer, but he got one. "I am Ilara," the voice replied. "I need your help. Please don't be afraid." Alex's mind raced. Was this a hoax? A dream? Or something else entirely? The voice sounded real. It wasn't robotic or distorted. It was warm, almost human, but with an odd musical quality he couldn't describe. The radio crackled again, and then Alex's old laptop, sitting inside his apartment, powered on by itself. The screen glowed from the window, catching his attention. Slowly, cautiously, Alex climbed down the ladder and stepped into his living room. The laptop screen showed a series of strange symbols, glowing bright green. They looked like nothing he had ever seen before, lines and curves that shifted and rearranged themselves as he watched. "What is this?" Alex whispered. The symbols began to change, forming letters in English. "I am lost. I have been watching your world. I need someone kind to help me." Alex blinked, his heart pounding. Watching? Who was this? What did they mean? He sat down in front of the laptop, his hands hovering over the keyboard. Should he respond? What if this was some kind of scam? Or worse, a hacker playing with his devices? But there was something about the voice and the message that felt genuine. Finally, he typed, "Who are you? What do you want?" For a moment, nothing happened. Then, new words appeared on the screen. "My name is Ilara. I am not from your world. I came here looking for peace, but I cannot go back. I am alone. Please don't leave me." "Not from this world." Alex stared at the words, his pulse quickening. Was this some elaborate joke, or was it something else entirely? He thought about turning off the laptop, pretending this never happened. But something about the sadness in Ilara's voice stopped him. Before he could type another response, the lights in his apartment flickered. His heart leaped as the room was plunged into darkness. He stood up, feeling his way toward the light switch. But then he stopped. A soft, glowing light was coming from the corner of the room. Alex turned slowly. In the middle of his living room, floating a few inches above the ground, was a small, pulsating orb of light. It was no bigger than a basketball, and it shimmered with colors he had never seen before. Soft blues, vibrant purples, and a hint of gold. The orb pulsed once, and suddenly a figure appeared. It was a projection, hazy and faint, but unmistakably a woman. Her features were unlike any human Alex had ever seen. Her skin was smooth and silvery, her eyes large and glowing softly like the orb itself. She looked at Alex, her expression filled with something he couldn't quite place. Hope, fear, longing. "Alex," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper, I've been searching for someone like you." He stepped back, his breath caught in his throat. "How do you know my name?" The figure tilted her head slightly, as if confused by his question. "I've been watching. I can explain everything, if you let me stay." The orb flickered, and for a moment, the figure disappeared. Then she returned, her voice more urgent this time. "Please, I don't want to be alone anymore." Alex didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to run, to leave the apartment and never look back. But another part, deep down, felt drawn to her. He didn't know why, but he couldn't shake the feeling that she was telling the truth. Before he could decide, the orb pulsed again, brighter this time, and her voice whispered one last time. "I'm closer than you think." The room went dark, the visitor in the shadows. The next morning, Alex woke up feeling as though he hadn't slept at all. His dreams had been filled with strange lights and a voice calling his name. But as sunlight streamed through the window, the memory of the previous night felt distant, almost unreal. Maybe it had been a dream, he thought. Maybe he'd fallen asleep on the couch, and his mind had created the entire thing. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. As he got ready for the day, he noticed the laptop on the table. Its screen was black, the same as when he'd last seen it. Tentatively, he pressed the power button. Nothing happened. The device refused to turn on, as though whatever had activated it the night before had drained it completely. "Great," he muttered to himself. "First, ghosts in my laptop, and now it's dead." But when he reached for his coffee mug, he noticed something strange. A small silver object lay beside it, a coin-sized disc that shimmered faintly in the light. He picked it up carefully, turning it over in his hands. It was cool to the touch, with strange, intricate patterns etched into its surface. They looked a lot like the symbols that had appeared on his screen. He didn't remember seeing it there before. The day passed uneventfully, but Alex couldn't focus on anything. He kept checking over his shoulder, expecting something, or someone, to appear. Every time he passed his laptop, he felt a twinge of unease. By the time the sun began to set, he decided he'd had enough. If this Ilara, or whatever she was, wanted to contact him again, she would have to wait. He wasn't about to spend another sleepless night worrying about alien ghosts. He turned off all his devices, locked his doors, and crawled into bed, determined to put the strange events behind him. But the universe had other plans. Sometime in the middle of the night, Alex woke to a faint sound. It was a soft hum, like the low buzz of electricity. He lay still, his heart racing. The sound grew louder, accompanied by a faint glow that seeped under his bedroom door. Slowly, he sat up, his breath catching in his throat. The glow wasn't just light. It pulsed, shifting between colors, just like the orb he'd seen the night before. Alex swung his legs off the bed and stood, his movements slow and deliberate. He didn't want to make a sound, didn't want to alert whatever was out there. Step by step, he crept toward the door, his hand reaching out to turn the knob. When he opened it, his breath hitched. Standing in the middle of his living room was the figure from the night before, Ilara. But this time, she wasn't just a projection. She was real. She stood there, her silvery skin catching the faint moonlight streaming through the window. Her glowing eyes met his, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "Alex," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to frighten you." Alex stared at her, his mind struggling to make sense of what he was seeing. "You're real," he whispered. Ilara nodded. "I didn't know how else to reach you. I thought, if I came here myself, you might understand." "Understand what?" he asked, his voice sharper than he intended. "Who? What are you?" She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I told you. My name is Ilara. I am not from this world. My home, it's gone. I've been hiding here, but I can't stay hidden anymore. I need someone I can trust." Why me? Alex asked, his tone filled with both suspicion and curiosity. Because you're kind, she said simply. I've been watching your world for a long time. Most people, they're not like you. They wouldn't care. But you look at the stars like they mean something. You want more than this life. And I thought, maybe you'd understand what it feels like to be alone. Her words struck a nerve. Alex wanted to argue, to deny it, but deep down, he knew she was right. He was lonely. He'd always been lonely. But that didn't mean he could trust her. This is insane, he muttered, running a hand through his hair. You expect me to believe you're some kind of alien, that you've been watching me. Ilara stepped closer, her movements slow and deliberate, as though she were afraid he might bolt. I know it's hard to believe, but I can prove it. She held out her hand, palm up. The silver disc from that morning rested in her grasp, glowing faintly. This is how I've been communicating with you. It connects me to your world's technology. It's also how I can show you the truth. Alex hesitated, his gaze flickering between her glowing eyes and the disc in her hand. Every instinct told him to run, to get as far away from her as possible. But something about her, something in the way she looked at him, made him pause. Finally, he reached out and took the disc. The moment his fingers brushed the surface, his vision exploded with light. Images and sounds flooded his mind. An alien world, vast and beautiful, reduced to ash. Ilara's people, fleeing in desperation. Her ship crashing into Earth's atmosphere. And then, nothing. Just her, alone, wandering a strange and unkind planet, searching for someone who would listen. When the vision ended, Alex staggered back, the disc slipping from his fingers. He looked at Ilara, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. You're telling the truth, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Ilara nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I wouldn't lie to you, Alex. I need your help. You're my only hope. Shadows of the past. Alex sat in stunned silence, the silver disc still glowing faintly on the floor between them. The images Ilara had shown him swirled in his mind like a storm, her world's destruction, her escape, and the years she'd spent alone on Earth. It was too much to process, and yet the sincerity in her voice made it impossible to dismiss. Ilara stood a few feet away, her hands clasped in front of her. Her luminous eyes, filled with a strange mix of hope and fear, never left his face. She seemed to be waiting for him to say something, to decide what came next. Finally, Alex found his voice. Why me? He asked, his tone softer this time. Out of all the people on this planet, why did you choose me? Ilara hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. It wasn't just chance, she admitted. I've been observing humanity for a long time, trying to understand your people. Most of the ones I've seen are not like you. They're focused on themselves, on power, on things that don't matter. But you're different. You look at the stars as if you're searching for something, just like I am. Alex's throat tightened. He didn't like how easily she could see through him, how her words felt like a mirror reflecting parts of himself he wasn't ready to confront. I'm not some hero, he said, his voice low. I don't even know how to help you. You've already helped me, Ilara said, taking a cautious step closer, just by listening. Do you know how long it's been since someone looked at me without fear? Alex didn't reply. He wasn't sure what to say. Instead, he leaned down and picked up the disc. The cool metal hummed softly in his hand, its intricate patterns glowing brighter as if responding to his touch. What is this thing? He asked. It's called an Ection shard, Ilara explained. It's a piece of technology from my world. It holds memories, data, even energy. It's how I survived here. Without it, I wouldn't have been able to hide for so long. Alex's brow furrowed. Hide? From who? Ilara's expression darkened. She took a step back, her gaze darting toward the window as though she expected something, or someone, to appear at any moment. They're called the Shroud, a group of hunters who destroy anything they don't understand. They were the ones who destroyed my world. Her voice trembled slightly, and she wrapped her arms around herself. I thought I'd escaped them when I came here, but they found me. Alex's heart skipped a beat. Wait, you're saying they're here? On Earth? She nodded. Not many, but enough. They've been searching for me ever since my ship crashed. I've managed to avoid them, but now I don't know how much longer I can stay hidden. The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling heavily between them. Alex's mind raced. If what she was saying was true, then he wasn't just dealing with one alien. He was caught in the middle of something much bigger, something dangerous. Why come to me now? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. If these Shroud are after you, wouldn't it be safer to stay hidden? Ilara hesitated, then stepped closer, her glowing eyes locking onto his. Because I can't run anymore. I'm tired of hiding, Alex. I don't want to just survive. I want to live. And I believe you can help me do that. Her words hung in the air, filled with a quiet desperation that made Alex's chest tighten. He wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, that he wasn't the kind of person who could save anyone. But the way she looked at him, as if he was her last hope, made it impossible to say no. Before he could respond, a sudden noise shattered the stillness of the room. A sharp metallic sound, like the scraping of steel against steel. Alex's head snapped toward the window, his pulse quickening. What was that? He asked. Ilara's expression turned to one of alarm. She moved quickly, placing herself between Alex and the window. They're here. His stomach dropped. What? How? They must have traced the shard, she said, her voice tight. I didn't think they could, but I was wrong. The noise came again, louder this time. Alex could see shadows moving outside, faint but unmistakable. His instincts screamed at him to run, but his feet refused to move. Ilara reached out, grabbing his hand. Her touch was warm, despite her silvery skin. We have to leave. Now. Leave. Alex repeated, his voice rising. Where are we supposed to go? There's a safe place, she said quickly. But we can't stay here. If they find us. The window shattered, glass spraying across the room. Alex ducked instinctively, shielding his face. When he looked up, his blood ran cold. A figure stepped through the broken window, its form cloaked in darkness. It was tall and humanoid, but its body seemed to shimmer, as if it wasn't entirely solid. Its eyes glowed a harsh, unearthly red, and in its hand, it held a weapon that looked like a cross between a sword and a spear. Ilara stepped in front of Alex, her stance protective. Stay behind me, she said firmly. The creature tilted its head, its gaze fixed on her. When it spoke, its voice was low and guttural, filled with a chilling menace. You cannot run. Action. Surrender the shard, and your death will be swift. Ilara didn't respond. Instead, she raised her hand, and the shard in Alex's pocket began to glow brighter. Energy crackled in the air, and the creature took a step back, hissing in anger. Alex, she said without looking at him, when I tell you to run, you run. Do you understand? But, do you understand? She repeated, her tone leaving no room for argument. Alex swallowed hard. Yeah, I understand. Ilara turned her attention back to the creature, her silvery skin glowing faintly. You should have stayed in the shadows, she said quietly. Now you'll see why I survived. And then, all at once, the room exploded with light. A light in the darkness. The room was a blur of light and sound as Ilara's energy surged to life. The glowing shard in Alex's pocket grew warm, its light spilling into the chaos like a living flame. He stumbled backward, shielding his eyes as a shockwave rippled through the air, sending shards of broken glass skittering across the floor. The creature, the shroud, lurched backward, its dark form flickering as though struggling to maintain its shape. Its weapon, a gleaming spear of black metal, vibrated with an ominous hum, but Ilara didn't give it a chance to strike. She stepped forward, her silvery skin shimmering with an intensity Alex hadn't seen before. Her outstretched hand emitted a blinding beam of light, cutting through the air like a blade. The shroud hissed, raising its weapon to block the attack, but the light pierced through its defenses, striking it square in the chest. The creature let out an inhuman shriek, its body convulsing as the light consumed it. For a brief moment, Alex thought it might vanish entirely. But then, with a burst of shadowy energy, it dissolved into a swirling black mist and disappeared through the shattered window. Silence fell. Alex lowered his arm, his heart hammering in his chest. The room was a mess. Glass and debris covered the floor, and the air was thick with the faint smell of ozone. Ilara stood in the center of it all, her shoulders rising and falling with each breath. The glow around her had dimmed, but her eyes still shone with a fierce, unyielding light. "Is it gone?" Alex asked, his voice shaky. Ilara nodded, though her expression was grim. "For now, but it will be back. And next time, it won't come alone." The escape. Ilara wasted no time. She moved quickly, her hands trembling slightly as she picked up the shard from where it had fallen. She slipped it into a small metallic pouch that she wore at her hip, then turned to Alex. "We need to leave," she said. "Now." Alex blinked. "Leave? Go where? My whole life is here." She looked at him, her expression softening. "I know this is hard. I never wanted to drag you into this, but staying here isn't safe. Not for you. Not for anyone." He hesitated, his mind racing. His apartment was all he had. It wasn't much, but it was home. Yet, deep down, he knew she was right. The creature's attack had been no accident. If the shroud wanted Ilara, and by extension, the shard, they wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. And if they came back, they'd tear apart everything in their path to find her. "Fine," he said, swallowing the lump in his throat. "But you owe me some answers, real answers." Ilara nodded. "I'll tell you everything. But first, we need to get to a safe place." She turned toward the door, motioning for him to follow. Alex grabbed his jacket, his keys, and his phone, though he wasn't sure any of it would matter where they were going. As they stepped out into the cool night air, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change forever. The chase. They hadn't been walking for more than a few minutes when Alex noticed something strange. The streetlights above them flickered, their yellow glow fading in and out like a heartbeat. The shadows on the ground seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally, reaching toward them as if alive. "Ilara," he said, his voice low. "Something's wrong." She glanced around, her posture tense. "They're close." "How can you tell?" "Because they're always close," she said, her tone clipped. "The shroud don't stop. They track energy signatures, and the shard is like a beacon. They'll follow it until—" She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes snapping toward the end of the street. Alex followed her gaze and felt his stomach drop. 3 figures emerged from the shadows, their forms flickering like faulty holograms. They were tall and humanoid, but their bodies were shrouded in darkness, their faces hidden beneath glowing red masks. Each one carried a weapon, blades, staffs, and strange, pulsating devices that looked like something out of a nightmare. "Run," Ilara whispered. "What?" "I said run." She grabbed his arm and pulled him into a sprint. Alex's heart pounded as they tore down the street, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the empty night. Behind them, the shroud let out a series of guttural, alien sounds that sent chills down his spine. He didn't need to turn around to know they were being followed. The hideout. Ilara led him through a maze of back alleys and side streets, her movements swift and precise. She seemed to know exactly where she was going. though Alex had no idea how. His lungs burned, and his legs felt like they might give out at any moment. But he pushed himself to keep up. Finally, they reached a small, nondescript building tucked away in a forgotten corner of the city. Ilara ushered him inside, slamming the door shut behind them. She placed her hand against the wall, and a faint hum filled the air as a series of glowing lines spread across the surface. The door sealed itself with a soft hiss. Alex doubled over, gasping for breath. "What is this place?" "A safe house," Ilara said. "There aren't many left, but this one should hold. For now." He straightened, taking in their surroundings. The room was small and bare, with metallic walls that seemed to hum faintly. A single console sat in the corner, its surface covered in glowing alien symbols. "You've done this before," Alex said, eyeing her warily. She nodded. "Too many times." "Then tell me what's going on." "The truth, this time." Ilara hesitated, her gaze flickering to the console. She seemed to be weighing her options, deciding how much to reveal. Finally, she met his eyes. "The shroud didn't just destroy my world," she said. "They're trying to destroy every world. They see life as chaos, something that needs to be controlled or erased. The shard is the only thing powerful enough to stop them. That's why they want it, and why they'll never stop hunting me." Alex stared at her, his mind struggling to keep up. "And you think I can help you stop them?" "I don't just think it," she said quietly. "I know it." Before he could respond, the console let out a sharp beep. Ilara's expression darkened as she moved toward it, her fingers flying over the controls. "They found us," she said grimly. "We don't have much time." The fight for survival. The hum of the console grew louder, filling the small room with an electric tension that prickled at Alex's skin. He stood frozen as Ilara worked frantically, her hands moving over the alien controls with practiced precision. The screen glowed brighter, flashing symbols that he couldn't understand but knew were bad. "They've breached the outer perimeter," she said, her voice tight. "It won't take them long to find us." "Can't we just run again?" Alex asked, the panic rising in his voice. Ilara shook her head. "There's no time. They're too close. If we leave now, they'll catch us in the open." She glanced at him, her glowing eyes filled with determination. "We have to fight." "Fight?" Alex stared at her as if she'd lost her mind. "With what? I don't have a weapon, and I'm not exactly a trained alien warrior." Ilara turned to him, her expression softening for a moment. "You don't need to fight like them. Just trust me. I'll protect you." Before Alex could respond, a loud bang reverberated through the room. The walls shuddered, and the glowing lines that crisscrossed their surface flickered ominously. Another bang followed, this one louder and closer. "They're breaking through," Ilara said, her voice laced with urgency. She reached into her pouch and pulled out the Ection shard, its silver surface glowing with a pulsating light. "Take this." "What?" Alex looked at her like she was crazy. "Why would I take that? Isn't that what they're after?" "Exactly," she said, pressing the shard into his hands. "If they get it, everything's over. You have to keep it safe, no matter what." Another deafening crash made the room quake. The door at the far end buckled under the force of an unseen blow, cracks spiderwebbing across its surface. Alex's heart pounded as Ilara stepped between him and the door, her silvery skin beginning to glow. "Ilara," he started, his voice trembling. "You can't fight them alone." "I don't have a choice," she said, her tone resolute. "You're the only one who can carry the shard. If I don't stop them, they'll take it. And you." Alex opened his mouth to argue, but the door exploded inward, cutting him off. A wave of black mist surged into the room, coalescing into three tall figures. The shroud had arrived. The battle. The shroud moved with an eerie, predatory grace, their weapons glinting with a dark, malevolent energy. Their glowing red eyes locked onto the shard in Alex's hands, and one of them raised its weapon, a jagged spear that crackled with black lightning. Ilara didn't wait. She lunged forward, a burst of energy erupting from her hands. The light struck the nearest shroud, sending it stumbling backward with an ear-splitting hiss. But the other two were already moving, their forms blurring as they darted toward her. "Run, Alex," she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. But Alex couldn't move. His feet felt rooted to the floor as he watched the battle unfold. Ilara fought with a speed and precision he hadn't thought possible, her body glowing like a star as she unleashed wave after wave of energy. The Shroud were relentless, their dark weapons slicing through the air as they closed in on her from all sides. One of them broke away, its red eyes locking onto Alex. It moved toward him with terrifying speed, its weapon raised. Alex's instincts screamed at him to run, but his body wouldn't obey. The shard in his hands flared brightly, as if responding to the danger, but he had no idea how to use it. "Ilara," he shouted, his voice cracking with fear. She turned, her eyes widening as she saw the Shroud bearing down on him. With a burst of speed, she launched herself between them, her body colliding with the creature in a flash of light. They hit the ground hard, and Ilara pinned the Shroud beneath her, her hands glowing as she pressed them against its chest. "Go," she screamed, her voice raw with effort. "Take the Shard and go." This time, Alex didn't hesitate. Clutching the Shard tightly, he turned and bolted toward the far end of the room. A door slid open as he approached, revealing a narrow passageway that seemed to lead deeper into the building. He ran without looking back, the sound of the battle echoing in his ears. The revelation. The passageway opened into a small chamber filled with strange equipment. At the center of the room stood a cylindrical pod, its surface etched with the same glowing symbols as the Shard. Alex approached it cautiously, his breathing ragged. The Shard in his hand pulsed, its light growing brighter as he drew closer to the pod. A panel on the pod slid open, revealing a slot that was the exact size and shape of the Shard. "What is this?" he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's a lifeboat." Ilara's voice came from behind him, startling him. He turned to see her standing in the doorway, her silvery skin dim and her movements unsteady. She looked exhausted, but she was alive. "You made it," Alex said, relief washing over him. "For now," she said, her gaze shifting to the pod. "But we don't have much time. The Shard powers this vessel. It's our only chance to escape." "Escape to where?" Alex asked, his voice rising. "You said the Shroud are everywhere. Where can we go that they won't follow?" Ilara stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "There's a place," she said. "A sanctuary. It's far, but with the Shard, we can reach it." Alex hesitated, the weight of the Shard heavy in his hands. He thought about his life, about everything he would be leaving behind. But then he looked at Ilara, at the weariness in her eyes, the scars of a battle she'd been fighting for far too long. He knew what he had to do. "Let's go," he said, sliding the Shard into the pod. The room filled with a blinding light as the pod powered up, its systems coming to life. Ilara placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch steady despite the chaos around them. "Thank you, Alex," she said softly. The walls shuddered as the Shroud closed in, their guttural cries growing louder. But Alex didn't look back. Together, he and Ilara stepped into the pod, and as the door sealed shut behind them, he felt a strange sense of calm. The pod began to vibrate, its energy building to a crescendo. Alex closed his eyes, bracing himself for whatever came next. And then, with a burst of light, they were gone. A new world, a new threat. The sensation was unlike anything Alex had ever felt. His body felt weightless, suspended in a sea of light and energy. Colors swirled around him, brilliant blues, deep purples, and flashes of gold, forming patterns that seemed both chaotic and purposeful. Time itself felt distorted. Seconds stretched into eternities, and eternities collapsed into moments. Then, with a sudden jolt, The light faded, and Alex found himself standing on solid ground. He opened his eyes, blinking against the soft, golden glow of their new surroundings. They were no longer on Earth. Arrival in the sanctuary. The air was warm and filled with a faint metallic tang. The ground beneath Alex's feet was smooth and glass-like, reflecting the sky above. A swirling expanse of stars and nebulas that seemed impossibly close. Towering structures rose around them, their surfaces shimmering with the same alien symbols as the shard. The entire place pulsed with energy, as though it were alive. Ilara stood beside him, her silvery skin glowing faintly in the ambient light. She looked stronger now, more at ease, though her eyes still held a cautious edge. "Where are we?" Alex asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. "This is the sanctuary," Ilara said, her gaze sweeping over the landscape. "One of the last safe places in the universe. It's hidden, protected by the shard's energy. The shroud can't reach us here." Alex turned in a slow circle, trying to take it all in. The beauty of the place was overwhelming, but it was also unsettling. The structures were too perfect, the light too consistent. It felt like stepping into a dream, or a trap. "Are you sure we're safe?" he asked. Ilara hesitated, her expression thoughtful. "Safe, for now. But the shroud never stops searching. They'll find a way to breach this place eventually. That's why we need to act quickly." Alex frowned. "Act? Act how? I still don't even understand what's happening. You dragged me into this war, handed me a glowing alien artifact, and now you're telling me I have to do something about it." She turned to him, her expression softening. "I didn't mean for this to happen. But the shard chose you, Alex. It responds to you in a way it never did to me. That means you're connected to it, part of its purpose." "And what's that?" he asked, crossing his arms. "What's this purpose you keep talking about?" "To stop the shroud," she said simply. "The shard is more than a piece of technology. It's a weapon, a key to unlocking the power to destroy them." The Council of Echoes. Before Alex could respond, a low hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. The structures around them began to glow, their light intensifying as a group of figures emerged from the largest tower. They were tall and ethereal, their forms translucent and shimmering like the air on a hot day. Their eyes glowed with a soft, golden light, and they moved with a grace that seemed almost unnatural. Ilara straightened, her expression turning serious. "The Council," she said quietly. "They oversee the sanctuary." Alex watched as the figures approached, their gazes locking onto him with unnerving precision. He felt exposed, as though they could see every thought and memory inside his head. "Ilara of Action," one of the figures said, its voice resonating in the air like a chime. "You have returned." "I have," Ilara said, inclining her head respectfully. "And I bring with me the shard, and its bearer." The figure's gaze shifted to Alex. "The bearer," it said, its tone neutral. "Unexpected." Alex bristled. "Yeah, well, it wasn't exactly my choice." The figure's lips curved into what might have been a smile. "Few things of importance are." Another figure stepped forward, its glowing eyes narrowing slightly. "You understand the danger you've brought here. The shroud will sense the shard's activation. It is only a matter of time before they find us." "That's why we came," Ilara said. "The sanctuary is the only place where we can unlock the shard's full power. We need your help." The figures exchanged a series of looks, their expressions unreadable. Finally, the first one spoke again. "The shard's power is not easily harnessed. Its energy is ancient, its purpose complex. Even with our guidance, the bearer will face great peril." Alex felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of peril?" "The kind that tests not just your body, but your spirit," the figure said. "The shard will reveal its secrets only to those who are worthy. You must prove yourself, Alex." Alex glanced at Ilara, his stomach twisting with anxiety. And if I don't? The figure's expression darkened. Then the shroud will destroy everything. Not just this sanctuary, but your world, and countless others. The trial. Alex stood in the center of a vast, circular chamber, the shard glowing in his hands. The council had explained the trial, but their words had done little to prepare him for what lay ahead. The room was empty, save for a single pedestal in the center. The air was thick with tension, and the walls shimmered with a faint golden light. Ilara stood at the edge of the chamber, her expression unreadable. "You can do this, Alex," she said. "I believe in you." He didn't feel nearly as confident, but there was no turning back now. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward and placed the shard on the pedestal. The moment the shard touched the surface, the room exploded with light. Alex staggered backward, shielding his eyes as the walls dissolved, replaced by a swirling void of stars and shadows. Voices echoed around him, faint whispers that grew louder and louder until they became a deafening roar. "Who are you?" the voices demanded, their tones cold and unyielding. "Why do you seek our power?" Alex swallowed hard. I don't know," he admitted. "I didn't ask for this, but if there's a chance I can stop the shroud, then I have to try." The voices fell silent. Then, one by one, shapes began to emerge from the void. They were fragments of Alex's memories, moments of pain, fear, and regret. He saw himself as a child, alone on the playground. He saw his father walking out the door, leaving without a word. He saw himself sitting in his apartment, staring at the stars and wishing for something more. The shard glowed brighter, its light piercing through the darkness. The memories began to shift, showing moments of strength and kindness, helping a stranger, comforting a friend, standing up for what he believed in. The voices returned, softer this time. "You carry both light and shadow within you. Which will you choose?" Alex took a deep breath, his hands curling into fists. "I choose the light." The void trembled, and the shard flared with a brilliant golden light. The memories dissolved, replaced by a single image, a towering crystalline structure glowing in the distance. "The power you seek lies ahead," the voices said. "But beware, the shroud will not let you claim it without a fight." As the vision faded, Alex opened his eyes to find himself back in the chamber. The shard pulsed in his hands, its light stronger than ever. Ilara stepped forward, her expression filled with awe. "You did it," she said softly. Alex looked at the shard, its glow reflecting in his eyes. "Not yet," he said, "but I will." The final stand. The glow of the shard lit the chamber as Alex stepped forward, his grip on the pulsating artifact tightening. It no longer felt like an alien object in his hands. It felt alive, as if it were responding to his thoughts, his resolve. The crystalline structure from the vision lingered in his mind, a beacon of hope, but also a warning. He glanced at Ilara, who stood beside him, her expression resolute but tinged with worry. "Is it really enough?" Alex asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his chest. Ilara nodded, though her gaze flicked briefly to the shard. "It has to be. The shard is the only thing that can end this, Alex. But its power will test you again, and it won't hold back. This is where the shroud will make their final move. They'll throw everything they have at us to stop you." Alex took a deep breath, steeling himself. "Then we stop them first." The journey to the heart. The council had provided them with a map of the sanctuary, detailing a path to the crystalline core, the heart of Eternum, as they called it. It was a place of immense power, where the shard could unlock its full potential. But the journey wasn't simple. The path wound through labyrinthine corridors and vast, open plains dotted with towering obelisks that crackled with energy. As Alex and Ilara moved deeper into the sanctuary, the air grew heavier, charged with a strange, electric tension. The shard's light grew brighter with each step, casting long shadows across the metallic walls. It felt as though the entire structure was watching them, waiting to see if they would succeed. "Do you feel that?" Alex asked, glancing at Ilara. She nodded. "The heart is responding to the shard. It knows we're coming." Alex hesitated, his mind racing. "And the shroud? Will they know too?" "They already do," Ilara said grimly. "They're drawn to the shard's energy, just like the heart. But don't worry, we're not alone." As if on cue, the air shimmered, and one of the council members appeared beside them, its translucent form flickering like a hologram. It raised a hand, and the obelisks ahead began to hum, their light intensifying. "We will hold the shroud at bay as long as we can," the council member said, its voice calm and measured. "But the heart's activation will draw them here in force. You must be swift." Alex nodded. "We'll make it." The shroud's onslaught, the final stretch of the journey, was the most dangerous. As Alex and Ilara approached the heart, a towering spire of crystal that radiated pure light, the ground beneath them began to quake. The air grew colder, and a low guttural sound echoed through the chamber. "They're here," Ilara said, her voice low. The shadows around them twisted and warped, forming into the dark, humanoid shapes of the shroud. Dozens of them emerged, their glowing red eyes fixed on the shard. They moved with an unnatural speed, their weapons drawn, and the air filled with the sound of their guttural cries. Ilara stepped forward, her hands glowing with energy. "I'll hold them off. You get to the heart." Alex hesitated. "You can't take them all on your own." "I've done it before," she said with a small smile. "Just trust me." Before he could argue, she launched herself into the fray, her body glowing like a star as she unleashed a torrent of energy at the advancing shroud. The chamber erupted into chaos. Blasts of light collided with dark energy, sending shockwaves rippling through the air. Alex forced himself to turn away, clutching the shard as he sprinted toward the heart. The crystalline structure seemed impossibly far, its light almost blinding. The ground beneath him cracked and shifted, but he pushed forward, the shard's glow guiding him. The heart of Eternum. When Alex reached the base of the heart, he was overwhelmed by its sheer magnitude. The crystal pulsed with a rhythm that matched the shards, as though the two were connected. At its center was a pedestal, its surface etched with the same glowing symbols as the shard. "This is it," Alex muttered to himself, placing the shard into the pedestal. The moment the shard connected, the entire chamber lit up. Beams of light shot out from the heart, carving through the darkness and scattering the shroud like shadows before the sun. The air vibrated with a deep, resonant hum, and Alex felt a surge of energy course through him. Visions flooded his mind. Images of the universe, of worlds untouched by the shroud's corruption. He saw the shard's power not just as a weapon, but as a force of creation, capable of restoring what had been lost. But the visions came with a choice. A voice, deep and ancient, echoed in his mind. "The shard's power is yours to command. Will you use it to destroy your enemies, or to rebuild what they have taken?" Alex hesitated. The weight of the decision pressed down on him. Destroying the shroud would end the threat once and for all, but it would also mean sacrificing the shard's potential to heal the universe. Rebuilding would take longer, and it would leave them vulnerable. But it was a chance to create something better. He thought of Ilara, of her hope and determination. He thought of the lives the shroud had destroyed, the worlds they had raised. And then he made his choice. "I choose to rebuild," he said aloud. The heart responded instantly. The light intensified, spreading outward in waves that filled the chamber and beyond. Alex felt the shard's power flowing through him, its energy reshaping the sanctuary, healing its wounds and fortifying its defenses. The aftermath. When the light faded, the shroud were gone. The sanctuary stood stronger than ever, its structures glowing with renewed energy. Ilara approached Alex, her silvery skin glowing faintly. "You did it," she said, her voice filled with awe. "We did it." Alex corrected, a small smile tugging at his lips. But this isn't over, is it? Ilara shook her head. No, the shroud will return. But now, we have a chance. Thanks to you. As they stood together, the shard pulsing softly in the pedestal, Alex felt something he hadn't in a long time. Hope. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, he believed they could win. And he wasn't alone anymore.